Let's dive into the wild, raw, and unforgettable story of Shannon Hoon, the soulful frontman of Blind Melon, whose voice carved a place in rock history and whose life burned too bright, too fast. This isn't just a tale of music, it's a journey through dreams, demons, and a relentless chase for something real. Picture a kid from the heartland, guitar slung over his shoulder, stepping into the chaos of Los Angeles with nothing but talent and a hunger for more. His story is a roller coaster, and we're riding it all the way through, with twists that'll leave you breathless. So, hit that subscribe button, settle in, and let's unravel a life that's as inspiring as it is heartbreaking, told in a way that'll keep you hooked for every single second. We start in Lafayette, Indiana, a small town where the sky feels low and the expectations feel heavy. Shannon Hoon grew up in a place where life seemed to come with a script. Play sports, go to Purdue University, blend in. His dad, a former athlete, had big dreams for his son, but they weren't Shannon's dreams. Football fields and locker rooms, that wasn't him. He felt like a stranger in his own hometown, suffocated by conservative values that didn't leave room for the fire burning inside him. I had no identity of my own, he'd later say, his words carrying the weight of a kid who felt like he was disappearing. In Lafayette, if you didn't follow the path laid out for you, you were an outcast. And Shannon? He was the kind of outcast who wasn't afraid to stand out. Music became his escape, his rebellion, his everything. As a teenager, he'd lose himself in the psychedelic sprawl of Pink Floyd, the gritty howl of Led Zeppelin, the theatrical chaos of Kiss, and the soulful storytelling of Elton John. These weren't just bands. They were maps to a world beyond Indiana. Shannon started singing, his voice raw and powerful, like he was pulling every note straight from his heart. By high school, he was fronting a heavy metal band called Stiff Kitten, tearing up local stages with a presence that made people stop and stare. But the stage wasn't the only place he was chasing thrills. Shannon fell in with a crowd that lived on the edge. Drugs, alcohol, late nights that blurred into trouble. His mom, Nell, called those years a nightmare. She'd pick up the phone to hear her son was in jail again, bailing him out 4 times at one point, always bracing for the call she dreaded most. I didn't think he'd live that long, she admitted, her voice heavy with the fear of a mother watching her child slip away. Trouble wasn't just a phase for Shannon. It was a shadow that clung to him. He was no stranger to the police, his name known at the local station for all the wrong reasons. His mom would later recall the sleepless nights, the constant worry, the feeling that every phone call could be the one that broke her heart. But even in those dark days, there was something about Shannon that refused to be dimmed. His voice, his energy, his refusal to fit into the mold. They were signs of a kid who was destined for more, even if he didn't know it yet. Lafayette couldn't hold him, and by 1990 he was ready to leave it behind. At 22, he packed his bags and headed for Los Angeles, dodging a drug raid back home by the skin of his teeth. It was a narrow escape, the kind that felt like fate was giving him one last chance to rewrite his story. LA was a different beast, a city of neon dreams, endless possibilities, and dangers that could swallow you whole. Shannon arrived with nothing but his voice and a hunger to make something of himself. He wasn't chasing fame for fame's sake. He was chasing a life that felt like his. And here's where the story takes a turn that sounds like it was ripped from a movie. He didn't just crash on some random couch in LA. He moved in with Axl Rose, the frontman of Guns N' Roses, who was at the peak of rock and roll stardom. Axl had gone to high school with Shannon's sister back in Lafayette, and she'd asked him to look out for her little brother. Talk about a cosmic connection. Living with Axl wasn't just a lucky break, it was a launch pad. Guns N' Roses were the biggest band in the world, their songs blasting from every radio, their shows selling out stadiums. And Shannon? He was suddenly brushing shoulders with rock royalty, a kid from Indiana, standing in the epicenter of it all. Let's hit pause for a second. Imagine you're Shannon, fresh off a bus from a nowhere town, and you're kicking it with Axl Rose in his LA pad. The walls are probably lined with platinum records, the air thick with cigarette smoke and ambition. It's the kind of moment that could make your heart race and your head spin. And for Shannon, it did. He didn't just hang out, he jumped right into the deep end. Axl brought him into the studio and Shannon laid down backup vocals for Guns N' Roses' Use Your Illusion albums. That's his voice weaving through November Rain, adding soul to Live and Let Die, Haunting the Garden, and Breaking Hearts in Don't Cry. He even popped up in the Don't Cry music video, his long hair and intense eyes making it clear he was born for this. The press caught wind of this Indiana kid with the golden voice, and before Blind Melon even had a record deal, the hype was unreal. They were dubbed the Junior Guns N' Roses, a label that sounded cool on paper but made Shannon's skin crawl. He didn't come to LA to be anyone's sidekick. He came to be a star. So, how did Blind Melon come together? Picture a grimy LA rehearsal space, the kind where the air smells like sweat and ambition. Brad Smith and Roger Stevens, two musicians with big dreams of their own, were on the hunt for a singer to complete their band. They'd heard rumors about this kid from Indiana who just rolled into town, a guy who filled a room the second he walked in. One night at a party, Shannon showed up, all charisma and restless energy. He wasn't polished, but he didn't need to be. He grabbed an acoustic guitar and played a song he'd written called Change. It wasn't just a performance, it was a revelation. The melody was haunting, the lyrics raw, and Shannon's voice. It hit like a tidal wave, carrying the weight of every struggle he'd ever faced. Brad and Roger were speechless. Roger later said Shannon was basically just off the bus. But his presence was undeniable, like he'd been born to stand in front of a mic. Within a month of hitting LA, Shannon was the frontman of Blind Melon, and the band was ready to shake the world. But here's where the story gets messy. Shannon wasn't just a rock star in the making. He was a storm. His talent was matched by a chaos that could light up a room or burn it down. The band quickly learned that their new singer had an addictive personality and a temper that could flip like a switch. Roger once recalled the first night they met, when Shannon went from charming to furious in seconds, veins bulging, eyes blazing like he was possessed. It was like meeting Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in the same breath. The guy could be your best friend one minute and a stranger the next. His emotions a wildfire that could warm you or destroy you. And then there was the cocaine. It wasn't just a party drug for Shannon. It was a shadow that followed him everywhere. Some nights he could barely stand, let alone perform. His behavior started driving wedges between the bandmates, fraying the bonds they were trying to build. But they stuck with him. Why? Because when Shannon was on, he was untouchable. His voice could break your heart and lift your soul in the same breath. And that kind of magic was worth the chaos. Blind Melon's debut album hit shelves in September 1992, and it didn't exactly set the world on fire at first. Shannon's lyrics were like pages from his diary, raw and unfiltered, digging into the struggles he'd carried from Lafayette. Songs like Holy Man took aim at the narrow-mindedness he'd grown up around, calling out the hypocrisy he'd seen in his small town's religious circles. Change was even more personal, a gut punch of a song that challenged anyone, including himself, to break free from the patterns holding them back. The album was gritty, soulful, and real, blending rock, blues, and a touch of something indefinable that was pure Shannon. But it took time to find its audience. The world wasn't quite ready for Blind Melon, not yet. Then came No Rain. In June 1993, MTV started playing the video, and everything changed. You know the one, The B-girl, twirling in her quirky costume, the vibrant colors, the feel-good vibe that cut through the grunge-heavy airwaves like a ray of sunshine. That video wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural moment, one of the most iconic of the 90s. It captured something universal, a story of finding your place in a world that doesn't always understand you. Within weeks, the album shot to number 3 on the Billboard 200, selling over 100,000 copies a week. Blind Melon wasn't just a band anymore, they were a phenomenon. Their name on every radio station, their faces on every TV screen. The B-girl became a symbol, and No Rain became an anthem. You'd think Shannon would be riding high, right? Wrong? He hated it. Not the success exactly, but the way No Rain took over everything. Fans loved the video, but Shannon wanted them to love the music first, the lyrics that poured out of his soul. If you only like No Rain because of the video, don't buy our record. He'd snap in interviews, his frustration spilling over like a dam breaking. The press didn't help, slapping labels like hippie music on Blind Melon, comparing them to 60s and 70s bands like the Grateful Dead or Janis Joplin's Crew. Shannon wasn't having it. "I'm not a hippie," he told one reporter, his voice sharp with defiance. "I don't even know what that means." He blamed the flowers, the long hair, the whole vibe of the No Rain video for the stereotype, but the truth was deeper. Shannon was fighting to be seen for who he was, not what the world wanted him to be. He wasn't some flower child throwback. He was a man with something to say, and he wanted the world to listen. Fame brought glory, but it also brought trouble. Shannon's demons were never far behind, and the spotlight only made them louder. In October 1993, he made headlines for all the wrong reasons, getting hit with nudity and indecent exposure charges after stripping naked and urinating on stage during a Vancouver concert. It wasn't a stunt. It was Shannon, unfiltered. His impulsiveness taking over in a way that shocked even his bandmates. A few months later, in February 1994, he attacked a security guard during the American Music Awards taping. The headline screamed, "Rock star gone wild," but for those who knew Shannon, it was more than that. He was spiraling, caught in a cycle of addiction and impulsiveness that he couldn't break. The world saw a rebel. His band saw a man struggling to hold it together. Then came a moment that still sends chills down the spine. On April 8, 1994, the day Kurt Cobain's death was announced, Blind Melon performed on David Letterman. Shannon took the stage with a question mark scrawled on his forehead, a cryptic symbol that felt like a cry for help. He dedicated their performance of Change to Cobain, his voice trembling with emotion. It was haunting, like he was staring into a mirror and seeing his own future reflected back. Cobain's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was a warning, one that hit Shannon like a freight train. For a while, it scared him into action. He checked into a 30-day rehab program, determined to get clean. His bandmates saw a spark of hope, a glimpse of the Shannon they'd met back in that LA rehearsal space. But addiction is a beast, and Shannon's battle was far from over. By the time Blind Melon played Woodstock's 25th anniversary, he admitted to his bandmates that he'd been tripping on acid during their set. The confession wasn't a boast. It was a confession of how far he'd fallen. The band tried to stage an intervention, begging him to get help, but Shannon didn't show up. He was slipping away, and they could feel it. Things got worse when they moved to New Orleans to record their second album, Soup. The city was a siren's call, drugs, alcohol, chaos, and Shannon couldn't resist. Bassist Brad Smith called those recording sessions a total vampire existence, a haze of excess and madness. The band was creating something raw and powerful, an album that would later be called a masterpiece. But they were also watching their frontman drown in the very temptations they'd hoped to escape. Soup was darker, heavier, more experimental than their debut, a reflection of the turmoil swirling around them. Shannon's lyrics dug deeper, his voice carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. Songs like Galaxy and Saint, Andrew's Fall were raw and introspective, while 2x4 grappled with his addiction head-on. The album was a risk, a departure from the sunny vibes of No Rain, and it didn't get the love it deserved at the time. But for those who listened closely, it was Shannon at his most honest, pouring his heart into every note, even as his life was unraveling. But there was a flicker of hope in the darkness, a moment that felt like it could change everything. In July 1995, Shannon became a father. His longtime girlfriend gave birth to their daughter, Nico Blue, and for the first time in years, Shannon had a reason to fight for something bigger than himself. Fatherhood changed him, even if just for a moment. He looked at Nico and saw a future he wanted to be part of, a reason to be better. He went back to rehab, pouring everything he had into getting sober. His bandmates saw the old Shannon again, the one who could light up a room with a smile, who could make you believe in the impossible. When Blind Melon hit the road to tour for Soup, they brought in a drug counselor, and Shannon's girlfriend and baby joined them on the bus. For a little while, it felt like a new chapter. The tour kicked off, with Shannon looking healthier, showing up clean, even putting on a little weight. The band believed in him, and he was trying to believe in himself. The tour was a chance to show the world what Soup was made of, to prove Blind Melon was more than a one-hit wonder. Shannon threw himself into the performances, his voice soaring, his energy electric. Fans who saw those shows still talk about them, about the way Shannon could make you feel every word he sang. But the road is a brutal place for someone fighting addiction, and the cracks started to show. The sobriety coach was let go, a decision that would haunt the band later. During a stop in L.A., Shannon relapsed, hard. The progress he'd made, the hope he'd carried, it slipped through his fingers like sand. His girlfriend and Nico left the tour, and Shannon was alone again, just him and the demons he'd been running from his whole life. The end came fast, and it came cruelly. On October 20th, 1995, after a sloppy show in Houston, Shannon stayed up all night on the tour bus, lost in a drug-fueled haze. The band was headed to New Orleans, the city that had already taken so much from him. When they arrived, Shannon wandered the streets for a bit, his mind a storm of exhaustion and excess. He eventually crawled into his bunk, seeking refuge in sleep. But it wasn't sleep that found him. Hours later, a roadie checked on him and found him unresponsive. Shannon Hoon, the voice of a generation, was gone at just 28. The coroner called it a drug overdose, but for those who loved him, it was more than a statistic. It was a life that burned at both ends, a heart that gave everything until there was nothing left to give. The aftermath was shattering, a wound that never fully healed. Drummer Glenn Graham put it in words that still ache. It's surreal. We're at the funeral for a friend, and everything is over. Your life, as you know it, is over. Guitarist Roger Stevens fled to New York, carrying the weight of loss so heavy it left him lost for years. The band was broken not just as musicians, but as people. They tried to keep going, holding auditions for a new singer, but it was like trying to replace the sun. Shannon wasn't just their frontman. He was their heartbeat, the one who made it all make sense. In 1999, Blind Melon called it quits, unable to move forward without him. They released a compilation album, Nico, as a tribute to Shannon, with proceeds going to his daughter and to programs helping musicians battle addiction. It was a way to honor the man they'd lost, to keep his light alive even in the darkness. In 2019, a documentary called All I Can Say brought Shannon back to life, pieced together from footage he shot himself on a camcorder from 1990 to 1995. It's raw, intimate, and unflinching, a window into a man who lived every moment like it was his last, even when those moments were breaking him. The film doesn't shy away from the chaos, but it also shows the beauty, the laughter, the creativity, the love he had for his music and his daughter. Watching it, you can't help but feel like Shannon is right there with you, telling his story in his own words, his own way. So, what's Shannon Hoon's legacy? It's more than No Rain and the B-Girl, though those will always be part of it. It's the kid who refused to let a small town cage him, who chased his dreams to the edge of the world and left behind a voice that still echoes. It's the warning of what happens when talent and trouble collide, when the fire that makes you shine also burns you down. Shannon's story is a rock and roll saga, but it's also a human one, full of hope, heartbreak, and the messy beauty of a life lived all the way. He was flawed, brilliant, and unforgettable, a man who poured his soul into every song, every scream, every second he had. His music still lives in the chords of Change, the longing of No Rain, the raw honesty of Soup. His story still resonates, a reminder to chase what sets your soul on fire, but to hold tight to the anchors that keep you from drifting too far. If this story hit you as hard as it hit me, drop a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let me know in the comments what Shannon Hoon's music means to you. His voice is still out there in every note, every lyric, every raw moment he left behind. Keep chasing your dreams, but don't forget the people who keep you grounded. Stay safe, stay inspired, and I'll see you in the next one.